recording this live, 2:12 p.m., early afternoon. Tuesday, April 29th, 2025 is the year. This is actually going to be episode 280.f, 280.f. Okay. Episode number 1243 overall, 1,243 overall. I'm streaming this out to YouTube and to Twitch. If I look at any comments, it's only going to be on Twitch. It's very convenient to put stuff on YouTube, but they've censored me so much. I just don't even bother there. They've lost any ability to monetize this channel again because I talk about life expectancy and its connection to the opioid epidemic. Isn't that amazing? You know, the one thing that they won't talk about on Fox News or mainstream news is how the main reason life expectancy went down is because of the opioid epidemic and not COVID. The main thing they don't talk about on InfoWars is how life expectancy went down because of the opioid epidemic and not COVID. Shannon Joy won't even mention the opioid epidemic at all. Dr. Drew, who claims to be into addiction, doesn't even like to mention the drug epidemic anymore. You just go across the board. No one will mention it. Every once in a while, someone will bring it up. Michael Knowles brought it up one day, and then it was back to Epstein and, bashing liberals and stuff. No one will talk about it. Isn't that amazing? Something which is just in the last few years taken 1 out of every 600 lives in the United States of America. No one will talk about it. And it's mostly taken young people as well. We lost 50,000 people during Vietnam, 50,000 Americans in war in Vietnam. Some more admittedly probably died afterwards due to suicide and drug addiction. This is 10 times that amount in a less period of time. And no one would mention it. What other journalists do you watch? What other supposed independent channels do you watch? Will they mention it? And I don't mean just say, oh, yeah, it happens because of I don't know, this group over here or that group over there. No. The cause is one thing, and I'm sure that I don't agree on the cause either. But will they at least mention that, you know what? There was no RNA pandemic because RNA can't pandemic. And there was no pathogen going from person to person to person, lowering life expectancy. Oh, and by the way, if they were more upfront about the role of the drug epidemic in the United States, at least, early on, they would have undercut one of the main justifications as far as overall statistics go that was used to justify the transfections of the vaccines in the first place. No one will mention it. Except me and Jonathan Cooey, Giggle Home Biological, thank God. I think Joe Marshall has mentioned it before on The Liberty Perspective. You can find him on Rumble, The Liberty Perspective. And that's it. Everyone else is quiet about it, which means either they are really that incompetent or they take money to not talk about that. I'm getting a little bit off topic right here, but I'm going to try to leave as much of this in as... But anyways, this is episode 280.f. So in the 280 series, what we're doing here, I'm sure you know by now, is we are doing the narration and a deep dive on the Judith Miller, Stephen Engelberg, and William Broad book called Germs, which was published September 7th, 9th. I say 7th, 9th because I've gotten conflicting evidence if the official date that it was available was for sale was September 7th or September 9th, 2001. One would be a Friday and the other one would be a Sunday in 2001. And this book gives you more information about September 11th and what was being talked about then as much as any other book ever written. How many people have ever referenced this book? Here's another good question for you. Go over the people that I can go over the people that I've listened to before. I have never heard anybody reference this book. Again, just like the opioid epidemic and how the drop in life expectancy was used to say we have because RNA pandemicing and lab leak and everything else. Lab leak, funny because we have Andy Weber on the screen. They won't mention this book. It's amazing how many people who are in the spotlight right now have connections in this book. Oh, you can bet your bottom that they're going to be talking about in a future chapter PCR testing and ways to be able to identify pathogens, which basically means microarrays. And microarray technology, which came from Packard. Packard was bought by PerkinElmer, or PE Corporation, and you know where that goes, because someone who made $100 million on that was Kevin McKernan's father. Oh, yeah, that's in this book. There's a lawyer in here, Mark Zed, who represented United States military personnel who refused to take the anthrax vaccine going into 2001. I believe Meryl Nass worked with him. Andrew Weber on the screen right here, which we're going to focus on today. Andrew Weber is a frequent collaborator of Peter Daszak. Andrew Weber in the DTRA, I believe, has collaborated with Robert Malone? It's totally bananas. What about that anthrax? Well, everyone loves to say Rumsfeld provided the anthrax or some nonsense like that. Russia had the facilities to make its own anthrax. Not to mention the mobile laboratories that were in Iraq most likely had technology which you could find through a company called Dynamac, which also had contracts with the United States Department of Homeland Security. And, of course, Dynamac is named after Diana MacArthur, who is the niece of Lady Bird Johnson, and we can just go right up to there, who married Donald MacArthur. Another sub-story that to share here is Andrew Weber is lionized in this book. Main character, okay? And he comes up more in following chapters. So, of course, we have to provide proper color on this. And in the chapter 7 that was just read, narrated, mostly I had to do the reading because most of chapter 7 was omitted from the Amazon Audible audiobook. It shows how he went to the Vozrozhdenia lab, this large anthrax manufacturing facility and other biological agent manufacturing facility in Kazakhstan, where they supposedly had, just fields and fields filled with leftover anthrax that they dumped because Gorbachev was afraid of it being found. Andrew Weber was the person who went to Ukraine in 2005 with Richard Lugar, a senator from Indiana of the Nunn-Lugar program, with the junior senator Barack Obama, and actually showed Barack Obama anthrax. Now, anthrax isn't really as big of a deal as you think. I mean, it's everywhere. I'll bet you it's even endemic in different places here in New England. It's one of those microorganisms that lives in soil and helps to break down biologics. It's part of the recycling system. It's part of the balance of the planet. Of course, it's a little bit unusual to have it extracted and pure in a bottle, but nonetheless, Andrew Weber was there. And Andrew Weber was collaborating with Jamie Metzel at the start of the pandemic, or maybe it was a year into the pandemic. Jamie Metzel is the person that started the Drastic Group, which supposedly found the fuse proposal, which is a hoax. So this whole lab leak idea is also, for COVID, also involves Andrew Weber. I'm not saying he's the mastermind, but his grubby little fingerprints are all over the place. And just like many of the other characters that have wound up in the spotlight right now, you can see how many connections there are between September 11th and COVID-19 by understanding who in the narrative control right now was also in the narrative control back on September 11th. There's a lot of people related to the Human Genome Project. A lot of people related to Moderna and sequencing. A lot of people related to the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. A lot of people related to, the world around Robert Malone. Robert Malone is not named, but a key person in this book, which we're going to be deep diving on next or second to next. Big Shot AIDS Vaccine by Patricia Thomas, which was published a week or 2 weeks after September 11th. And that means they were planning to publish it then probably 1 or 2 years in advance. All of these books were published at this time because they did not expect the events of September 11th, 2001. These books were all published when they were because I believe the plan was for a biological terror attack in the United States. I'm going to be as precise as maybe Thanksgiving Day parade of 2001 or the Olympics. The Olympics in Utah would have been another one that were being set up by Mitt Romney. There's a lot of metadata about that as well. The cauldron looked like a freaking double helix. They say it was an icicle. Okay. I think it was meant to be an icicle combined with a double helix DNA. That's really what it was meant to be. But they had to wipe that out because of September 11th, 2001. So all these books were about setting up narrative control. Micah Osterholm, Living Terrors. Yeah, the other one is The Cobra Event by Richard Preston. So there's a whole chapter upcoming in the book Germs, which actually talks about the Cobra Event. So the Cobra Event, written by Richard Preston, talks about, this pathogen which was designed and how it leaked out of a laboratory or something like that in New York City. This book was published in, I think, 1997 or 1998. Supposedly, this book, copyright 1997. Supposedly, this book was actually given to Bill Clinton, or a copy of this, not this one, of course. It was given to Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton read this book. This is the legend, and this is what made Bill Clinton agree to give all this money to the military, to Andrew Weber, to Lederberg, and a bunch of other people, and to throw more money at the Human Genome Project. This book, The Cobra Event. Also odd that someone that is in the Cobra Event, it's either in the Cobra Event or... Let's see here. I want to be sure. It's another one of the Richard Preston books. It may not be Cobra Event. It may have been the Hot Zone book, which also was, I think, 1995 or 1996. That book included Heinz Feldman, who went on to become the director of the Rocky Mountain Laboratory and a frequent co-author of Robert Malone. Meanwhile, one of the most, if you could say, this book isn't really about any one person in particular, but one of the one or two most frequent people discussed in this book, Big Shot AIDS Vaccine, is Nancy Haygood, who is the scientist who went to the FBI in 2007 and said Bruce Ivins is most likely the person who did the anthrax letters, and they took her word for it. And Nancy Haygood is the third most frequent co-author of Robert Malone's postdoc advisor, Murray Gardner, and Nancy Haygood, I believe, has been at the very least friendly with Robert Malone because of all the other people she co-authored with since 1989. And that's the Bruce Ivins. That's who led to the Bruce Ivins arrest. There's other stuff out here as well.
While on the subject, one more thing to note, and this is in relation to Bruce Ivins. If you look at newspapers back at the time, one of the more outspoken people in defense of Bruce Ivins, basically going over the logistics of the situation and how it would have been just logistically impossible for Bruce Ivins to pull it off, at least from a technical standpoint, all by himself, is Richard Spurtzel, and that's Spertzel, and he has been a person who is frequently referred to in this book. Throughout the first several chapters, there are dozens and dozens of references to Richard Spurtzel, who, again, went on to defend Bruce Ivins.
Having Robert Malone and Jill insist on being in the spotlight, especially given the fact that they were setting up a cancer research facility and the computing equipment at the Winburn facility, which was only 10 miles away from the Shanksville Flight 93 crash site where there was everything there but an airplane. And he joined the United States Uniformed Health Services with his wife, Jill, the year before. And they trained a non-American to come in and run that laboratory for us, where they were going to back up all the cancer data from the United States Army Walter Reed Hospital to an off-site location. It was the only center of excellence that the United States Army and Walter Reed was going to have. Interesting, because if there was, I don't know, a large-scale biological terror attack in a major U.S. metropolitan center such as New York City, the United States military might have been required to take an experimental anthrax vaccine, such as from Vical Corporation, where Robert Malone had worked previously, one of those gene therapy things. And, it would be interesting because if there was an unexpected increase in cancer in the military, the one place that you would find it would be Walter Reed. And Walter Reed's data would be being captured, with respect to cancers anyways, at the Winber facility. And the Winber facility is the one that Patrick Soon-Shiong bought. Has nothing to do with all of these other fantastic tales of, people running around and artwork and Nazis and millionaires and oil and all this other stuff. No. That's a joke. That's a joke. The pursuit of understanding and cracking the human genome and immortality is the gold. That's what's being sought after. Everything else is a joke, really. What I wanted to do in this show here is I just wanted to, again, walk through some of the bio of Andrew Weber, because although I'm not sure how strong of a person he is, he may be under the control of someone else. It's often said that he's a very soft-spoken person, not very intimidating, very bland. That means that he may not be the drive behind all of his own actions. But whatever the case, Andrew Weber is a very important person to know, and I've had an archive on him for a long time. And the very fact that I've had a great archive on him for a long time and no one's decided to share it goes to show that he probably is really important, because that tends to be what happens, right? No matter what you talk about these days, alternative media is almost where the truth goes to die. If you think you're being misled by mainstream media, by the time you get to the alt media, it only gets worse, because there's only a very few people here that are genuine and independent, and the rest. Okay, so this is the Andrew Weber page. So Andrew Weber was born in 1960. He was born in New York City. I'm actually going to read his bio here. Let's see, he went to Cornell University. You can see how his old Wikipedia page, which I've captured here, is so short. And then he got his Master's of Science of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. He played a key role in the Nunn-Lugar Cooperative Threat Reduction, which removed weapons-grade uranium from Kazakhstan and Georgia, and nuclear-capable Moldovan MiG-29s from Moldova. Weber oversaw and developed the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. So the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, the DTRA, which in COVID-19 years wound up playing a huge role with respect to the distribution of test kits, played a key role with respect to the support of the Ebola vaccine back in 2014 and 2015. Of course, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency provided the money, the capital, to support a program called Domain, which I guess Robert Malone actually led along with his college roommate, friend, and other previous DTRA science advisor, David Hone from Australia. So, and the Domain program is what Robert Malone used to determine in just a few hours or a few days all of the countermeasures which could be repurposed for this novel coronavirus. Of course, it was the first time they ever used the program, which means even if it was possible to do such a thing, how do you know that it returns the right answers? How do you know? What if you showed it SARS-CoV-2 through a mathematical model or through an electron microscope scan? I don't know how you would provide the data to it. And it returned battery acid and peanut butter, saying, hey, these are things which you can repurpose to help you deal with your SARS-CoV-2 infection or something like that. How would you know? The only way you would know is if you have experience and if you had trial runs giving this Domain program things to sort out novel pathogens which have never been seen before, and then you look at the countermeasures which it suggests, and then you try those countermeasures out. And eventually, over time, you gain a confidence level that it's going to give you the right answers, although there's always a possibility that this could be something new and crazy novel that you don't know about. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can just go to houstonic.live or houstononics.com, click on the D's and go down at the bottom, and you'll see this DOMANE, which stands for Discovery of Medical Countermeasures Against Novel Entities. I use Wikipedia all the time, But if Wikipedia wasn't as censored and narrative controlled as it is, you would find rich pages on Wikipedia for topics such as this. Instead, it's not allowed. So the first white paper, of course, on domain that you could find was from December 11th, 2019. And then from there, you can actually find articles such as from Science magazine, where it actually talks about Robert Malone and Robert Malone's work with this. You can see right there. Robert Malone, what does it say? Had his eyes on a viral enzyme called papain-like protease, which helps the pathogen replicate. To see whether famotidine binds to the protein, he would ordinarily need the enzyme's 3D structure, but that would not be available for months. So Malone recruited computational chemist Dr. Joshua Patel, president of Montreal-based molecular forecaster. Yeah, sure, bring in some more non-Americans while you're at it, dude. Not that non-Americans are inferior people, but dude, you live in the United States. I'm an American. We have Americans that pay American tax dollars. We have Americans that need work. You can't find someone in the United States to do this job for you? Why do you need to go to Nigeria to get someone to run the Winburn Center and analyze the cancer data for the United States military? Why do you need to go to Canada to get this guy to help you out with your domain project? Why do you need to share this project with an Australian, David Hone? It seems to me, like Jill Glasspool Malone and Robert Malone, that you're trying to do everything possible to screw over the United States of America. Which I guess is your right, but if you don't like the country, go somewhere else. There's 199 other wonderful countries to choose from. I like all of them, but this one's my home. If you don't like this one, choose somewhere else to go. Anyways, so that's the domain effort. But getting back to our Andrew Weber, which is really why we're doing this show here. Here's a 2003 document put out by the DTRA. The DTRA, by the way, for those who you keep hearing this phrase, stands for the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. Now, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency exists within the United States Department of Defense, the DoD. According to their PowerPoint slide, enables the United States government to prepare for and combat weapons of mass destruction and improvised threats, and to ensure nuclear deterrence. The Defense Threat Reduction Agency, it was first established in October of 1998 as a result of the 1997 Defense Reform Initiative by consolidating several DoD organizations, including the Defense Special Weapons Agency, successor to the Defense Nuclear Agency, and the On-Site Inspection Agency, the Defense Technology Security Administration, and the Nunlugar Cooperative Threat Reduction Program Office, and the Office of the Secretary of Defense were also incorporated into the new agency. Now, what it doesn't talk about too clearly is the fact that a lot of this work involved the United States State Department and these concerns about weapons of mass destruction. And a new agency, a new intelligence agency was created within the United States Department of Defense, which became this Defense Threat Reduction Agency. Now, there are 17 agencies, these special agencies within the United States military, Department of Defense. Another one that you most likely have heard of is DARPA, D-A-R-P-A, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. That's just another one of the 17. And they all have their own little specialized functions, okay? DARPA has a big budget, but a very small staff. Most people think that DARPA is thousands of employees. It's really only about 150 employees. Mostly, DARPA is a project management, a procurement agency, which handles specialized projects that other military agencies want funded. Okay, so if the U.S. Army wants to do a special research project on robot tanks, they would have capital available to do such a project within DARPA, and then DARPA could keep it classified and share it with other military agencies. Now, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency has a smaller budget than DARPA, but a staff of 2,000 or 3,000 people. I think it's 1,900 people. But its roots are actually from the United States State Department. Now, because the Defense Threat Reduction Agency works with the highest level of classification you could imagine, there's, of course, conflicts of interest. You could see how if there's a new special type of weapon that if you push a button, I don't know, kills everyone within 1,000-mile radius or something like that, right? Some brain-killing electromagnetic wave. Who the heck knows? The Defense Threat Reduction Agency, if it knew about such a thing, may not necessarily have to disclose all of that information to the top of the command of the United States Department of Defense. It may actually only have to share some of that with the United States State Department. So the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, I think, may not necessarily have bad people, but I think suffers from a conflict of interest. And one of my concerns about the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, who I think does have a lot of very talented people, is it runs into conflicts of allegiance and chain of command. And I'm not sure that that's in the best interest of the United States military or the security of the United States overall. It seems to create a vulnerability, actually. But this Andrew Weber played a role in the founding of the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. Now, I don't think he was actually a visionary of it. I don't see anything in his background to suggest that this 35-year-old would reimagine how to, design all of this reporting structure within the United States government. It means that he was, because of his work at the Kazakhstan Embassy, United States State Department, he was someone who was trusted. I know that he has a wife who went on or was a executive secretary for Hillary Clinton while she was either a senator or the First Lady of the United States. So it's complicated. Weber's case is pretty complicated, how he actually got into this position and how he gained this level of trust. As we see in the book Germs, at some point he did learn to speak fluent Russian, which is one of the reasons why, I guess amongst many, that he spent so much time overseas, Kazakhstan, Russia, and, was trusted by some people over there. So in this 2008 book, the United States Defense Threat Reduction Agency, it reflects back on the history of their own agency, and it talks about how Andrew Weber was one of their first directors. So one of the first directors of this really important agency happens to have almost a whole chapter about him in this book, Germs. Quite interesting, considering how critical the Defense Threat Reduction Agency is with respect to COVID-19. Everything from Robert Malone to Domain to Sina Bavari to a paper that came out at the end of 2018 that said GS5734, which went on to become known as remdesivir, was the most likely countermeasure to work against a novel coronavirus that causes a global pandemic that comes out of Asia, most likely after jumping off a bat in a wet market. I swear there was a document that said it that clearly. The person that wrote that document was the chief scientist at USAMRIID, United States Army Medical Research Institute for Infectious Diseases, Sina Bavari, who got into serious trouble by not sharing communications and the financial connections between USAMRIID and the DTRA, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. Whether or not that includes Andy Weber or not, I don't know. But that would mean that Andrew Weber is not only a key member of this book, not only the person who seems to be walking around the soil that, according to this book anyways, has the largest reserve of weaponized anthrax on the planet. And then he goes on to run this DTRA, the DTRA with Sina Bavari and Robert Malone and David Hone and the Domain Project and the samples of COVID-19, or I should say distributing the tests initially, etc., 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 etc. Not to mention, he does movies with Jamie Metzel about lab leak stuff. And I believe that when it came to narrative control, Andrew Weber stepped up or was told to step up. And, as I've mentioned earlier, Andrew Weber is the person that showed the anthrax to Junior Senator Barack Obama that was in a Ukraine laboratory in 2005 on a trip with Senator Richard Lugar, Noon Lugar Program, Defense Threat Reduction Agency, on a trip which ended with the United States entering into a very unique treaty with the nation of Ukraine that seemed to have an awful lot to do with biological weapons. Right after, by the way, the reported mobile anthrax manufacturing facilities that were in Iraq disappeared. They said they were taken with cranes and towed away. At the same time,
The Ukrainian.
military withdrew from Iraq in 2005. Interesting, because the Ukraine military would have withdrew using their airplane, as you can see here, the Antonov AN-225, the only airplane that would probably be big enough to actually transport mobile anthrax manufacturing facilities out of Iraq. So, yeah, you could talk about your fantasy that Rumsfeld took the anthrax to Iraq, but in reality, there were mobile laboratories there, and those mobile laboratories disappeared using a crane, as reported by mainstream media. I use mainstream sources. I don't trust whistleblowers. Don't ever trust anyone that says they use whistleblowers. It's the AN-225, the one that Putin blew up during the Russia invasion during COVID-19. So let's go down here a little bit more. You could see in 2009, he was recommended, this is in the Obama administration, to be the assistant to the Secretary of Defense for Nuclear and Chemical and Biological Defense Programs. So no longer in the DTRA, but now in another area of the United States Department of Defense. You can read his statement. Got it all captured. You could see this is a paper co-written by Tara O'Toole, Inglesby, at an event charting the future of biosecurity 10 years after the anthrax attacks. You can see him on a board there. November 11th, year 2013, co-presenting with Peter Daszak and the EcoHealth Alliance. 8 years before COVID-19. We didn't even have the funding approved yet for the supposed bat coronavirus research in Wuhan, where it was suggested that EcoHealth Alliance and Peter Daszak had a role in taking NIAID money from Anthony Fauci and creating a novel virus there. Andrew Weber was working with Peter Daszak at the time, or at the very least collaborating with him. You don't get many chances like this to travel somewhere and share a stage with somebody unless it's really important. And let's see here, November 24th, 2013, military gets into drug making, a costly biodefense drug venture. And I think this is the story with respect to Ebola, because now we have Ebola running rampant. So when the Ebola outbreak happens in West Africa, and of course this involves so many people in our story, it's ridiculous. This, of course, involves Peter Daszak. Of course, this involves Margaret Hamburg, the director of the FDA, who is also a frequent person mentioned in this book. Of course, it involves Robert Malone. Of course, it involves the brother of David Martin. David Martin's brother was in this area working on the Ebola response. It involves so many people in our current story, so many people involved in September 11th, and COVID-19 were also caught up in this Ebola outbreak. And apparently, Andrew Weber is another one of them. And Andrew Weber plays a key role in suggesting the United States Defense Threat Reduction Agency provide funding to get an Ebola vaccine manufactured. And the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, when it comes time to making that Ebola vaccine, who do they turn to? They turned to a company in Iowa called Newlink Corporation. And Newlink Corporation had a recombinant DNA vaccine for Ebola, designed in Canada a few years prior. And the person overseeing that work was Thomas Monath, also in this book, also involved in COVID-19, by the way. And Thomas Monath, I believe, was advised at Newlink to hire none other than Robert Malone to help broker that technology, that Ebola vaccine technology from Newlink to Merck Corporation, which just hired Julie Gerberding, the director of the CDC right at the time of September 11th. And you can watch the Blue Ribbon study panel. Andrew Weber is on one of these videos. And Donna Shalala is there. Of course, Donna Shalala was the head of, I think, the United States Health and Human Services under the Clinton administration, and was a big part of making sure that money was made available for that Winber Cancer Research Facility, that center of excellence that was working with the United States military, set up by none other than Robert Malone. That was only 10 miles away from Shanksville, Flight 93 crash site, where you can find everything except Flight 93 and the people who died on Flight 93. I'm not saying the plane didn't crash. I'm just saying it didn't crash there. God strike me down. Flight 93 did not crash there. I don't know what happened to it. I don't know where it crashed. Here is a show from March 11th, 2021. It's a program I'm not familiar with. It's called the 8,000 Hours Podcast. And I have the MP3. It's audio only. And it's a 2-hour interview on March 2021 with Andrew Weber. And Andy Weber will go down the possibility that it's a gain-of-function virus. So the possibility of it being a lab leak and gain-of-function and all this stuff is being fueled during COVID-19 in part by Andy Weber, the same guy that gets a whole chapter in this book that nobody wants to acknowledge even exists. As a matter of fact, even though there's an Amazon audiobook for this, the Amazon Audible audiobook is missing approximately 25 to 35% of this book, including the fact that this book mentions by name and used as a source Philip Zelikow, who went on to become the director, executive director, of the 9/11 Commission, where they most definitely did not talk about the abundance of evidence that everyone knew there was going to be a large-scale biological terror attack in a major U.S. metropolitan center that, because of the manufacturing problems at the Bioport in Michigan facility for the old anthrax vaccine, would have necessitated the military to take the new era of vaccines, the DNA vaccines, such as from Vical Corporation, where Robert Malone had his patents. And then there's a video from June 2020. I'll play that video short for you. Let me see. Let me cue it up. And then okay, here we are. So this is a video short that I made called Andrew Weber, DTRA, Defense Threat Reduction Agency, showing off some anthrax to Senator Obama and Kiev, Ukraine in 2005.
This is the Honorable Andy Weber presenting in early 2021 regarding coronavirus. As part of the Obama administration, Andy Weber provided oversight to the Defense Threat Reduction Agency for several years.
So this is 15 years ago. In the summer of 2005, I visited a public health laboratory in Kiev, Ukraine, with a junior senator from Illinois on his first trip.
That's Andrew Weber holding anthrax, showing Barack Obama in a Ukraine laboratory. How many people have pushed this idea that SARS is a gain-of-function virus and it involves a Ukraine laboratory? Here's a video of a former Defense Threat Reduction Agency director and, in some ways, a founder of the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. Someone who has almost a whole chapter in the book Germs that no one wants to admit even exists. Someone who was responsible for overseeing the largest collection, the largest burial ground of weaponized anthrax the world has ever seen. Someone who is out there with the COVID-19 narrative control story that it was definitely a lab leak. Someone who had worked with Peter Daszak here in Ukraine, showing a biological weapon to a junior Barack Obama. I'm very reserved in criticism of Obama, okay? I think Obama knew that he was being used. I think he knew, and that's not to criticize his capabilities in any way, but I think he knew that, he was going to be used to become president. And who supported Obama becoming president more than anyone else? It was really the people behind the Nunn Lugar program. Oh, that's right. Sam Nunn and Richard Lugar are people in this book. So Obama became president, And the real action during the Obama administration was biological weapons, Ebola, vaccines, and personalized medicine, which was the top agenda of the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, which was run by Margaret Hamburg, who, again, is another person in the Germs book, the book that nobody wants to mention. I'll just let this video restart here.
In early 2021 regarding coronavirus. As part of the Obama administration, Andy Weber provided oversight to the Defense Threat Reduction Agency for several years.
So this is 15 years ago. In the summer of 2005, I visited a public health laboratory in Kiev, Ukraine, with a junior senator from Illinois on his first trip overseas as a U.S. senator. And I'm holding in my hand a vial of Bacillus anthracis, which is the bacteria that causes anthrax. And the point here is that biology is inherently dual use. So this is not a bioweapons lab. This is just a legitimate public health diagnostics and research laboratory.
This video is not meant to suggest. In fact, the very fact that Andrew Weber made this video is pretty stupid. Okay, very ill-advised. Why? Why bring this up? There's other ways he could have reiterated the gain-of-function story without showing this, of all things. If he meant to show this to an audience and have it somehow move the national narrative, he would have chose an outlet other than the Bar Association of Metropolitan St. Louis. Look, I'm sure that there's wonderful people there, but the Bar Association of Metropolitan St. Louis is the place that you're going to show off the fact that you're involved in the confiscation of and collection of weapons-grade anthrax in Ukraine facilities with Barack Obama on the junior senator's first international trip to Ukraine with Senator Richard Lugar, who, by the way, went on to become the primary person to voice support for Margaret Hamburg to become the director of the FDA for effectively the full term of the Barack Obama presidency. I think it's a dim-witted thing that he did here. Here's the deal. While everyone else is so busy looking at the intentional trap of Epstein, a web of stories which has been designed to hide truth, I've been out there just following the names that the most important books that no one likes to talk about have discussed. That's why I found this video. There's so much stuff. There's so much gold just littered all over the ground. It's everywhere. There's so much data out there. There's so much data that can be collected for research. It's everywhere. People send me so many things. I'm like, I can't archive it all. Trust me, I'm working, between my own personal stuff and the family and this research. I'm already working maximum hours. The point is that there's so much out there. Once you start looking and you stop and you take off the glasses that are Epstein, Maxwell, Epstein, Maxwell, Epstein, Maxwell, Epstein, Maxwell. You take off those glasses, you're like, wow, look at all this amazing data that's everywhere that we can collect. A lot of it's out there because people have done dim-witted things like this and put something like this out there. And the reason why Andrew Weber and I'm sure a lot of others can get away with or do get away with doing dim-witted things like this is because the potential of online research, it's not being harnessed precisely because of all the narrative controllers that have been put out there to keep people trapped in nonsense mythology. I think the last thing I wanted to mention is that the Chapter 7 that we just covered talks about the Vector, V-E-K-T-O-R laboratory in Russia. It's other stuff. But the Vector laboratory, one of the main Americans, and he's not even an American, who was responsible for going to the Vector Laboratory, probably even with Andrew Weber, was, a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure he worked with Andrew Weber, is a guy named Jens Kuhn, Jenskuhn, Yen Kuhn. And Kuhn wound up having a role at the Defense Threat Reduction Agency and becoming a frequent collaborator of Sina Bavari, a name that, thanks to Jonathan Cooey, was actually mentioned in the Wuhan Lab Leak book put out by Skyhorse Publishing and Children's Health Defense, thank goodness. The same Sina Bavari who, along with his student, colleague, Alison Tatura, who up until that time was the last postdoc of Ralph Barrick, published a paper at the end of 2018 about how GS5734, which went on to become known as Gilead's remdesivir, was the most likely thing to help should the world experience a novel coronavirus that comes out of Southeast Asia, probably China, via a bat, maybe even going through a camel, starting a global pandemic, possibly originating with the zoonotic event in a wet market. It's remarkable. All of this on a book that came out September 7th, 9th, 2001. All these people and all of their work. September 7th, 9th, 2001. It's a heavy book, but a book that no one wants to talk about. And this is why you are seeing a hailstorm of panic right now about 9/11 truth. Because a little channel like mine really can make that much of a difference. All right. I think that's my little show for today. Thank you, guys. Thank you for supporters. This will be episode... Oh, yeah, this is going to be episode 280.f. And the reason for that is because the book Germs has a chapter 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, and then chapter 13 is conclusions. And I'm going to go through all of those separately, and I want the IDs to match the chapter numbers of the book. It's also noteworthy that each of these chapters has several extended pages towards the end where Judith Miller and Engelberg will actually go over all of the sources for each of those chapters. And it's not to say that everything that's in this book is true, but it's true that everything that is in this book was printed in this book. And if you do enough research, you know what I mean by that. All right, guys, thank you very much. Take care. You guys are winners if you're actually doing this with me. Thank you. Take care. God bless.